Well, each year I speak to about 100,000 high school students in different countries, just spreading the message of chastity and the meaning of authentic human love. And so we've got the website, Trongsach.com. We produce a lot of books and CDs, DVDs, things there. We've got a bureau of speakers. But the basic thrust of what we're trying to do is just teach people how to be pure of heart. Because if we can be pure of heart, then we can see God. It's not just about following all these rules so you don't go to hell and you don't get some disease. It's about learning how to authentically love other people and learning how to be loved ourselves, because some people struggle with more being loved than even learning how to love. And so that's the heart of the whole message, because you can't really understand chastity unless you understand how it frees you to love. Well, I think a lot of people are cohabiting because they're afraid of divorce, and they've maybe been raised in divorced families, and it's not because they don't take marriage seriously, but maybe because they take it really seriously and they're just scared, and so they're like, well, maybe if we just try it out. But marriage by its very essence is a permanent institution. It is a life, you can't test drive something that's permanent. It's impossible. And so with cohabitation, I think a lot of times people are sliding into it. Well, we've been sleeping together and I hang out at his house anyway, so I might as well just stay here and share a rent and save some money and figure out what it's going to be like. But when you look at long-term what's happening, they have a higher divorce rate. And I think the reason for that partly is sex will often cover up an absence of love that fails to develop. We feel so close, we feel like we're husband and wife, but in reality, do we really know how to communicate that well? Do we know how to solve financial problems? Do we know how to deal with this stuff? And a lot of times when you have sex in the relationship, it's so easy to overlook a lot of the problems that when you take the sex out, it's like, okay, we've got some stuff we've got to work on here, and we can't just bury it under a sexual relationship. And so with cohabitation, I mean, you look at where the word comes from in being compatible, because people are like, well, you got to see if we're compatible with each other. Compatible comes from Latin compati, which means to suffer with. It doesn't mean everything's going to be perfect and you guys are just going to fit great, because even if a couple live together for a year, hey, this is really great, I think we're really compatible, suffering is going to come in marriage. And do you have the virtues that you need to deal with that? And by not cohabiting, you've got to practice certain virtues like patience, faithfulness, self-control, saying no to my impulses to do what's best for this other person. Those are the same virtues that make marriages last. And so if you look at who's having the lasting marriages, typically it's not the couples who are cohabiting beforehand. Yeah, well, oxytocin is a neurochemical that's released in our bodies and our brains during different times in life. They say it can be released as quickly as when a woman receives a 20-second hug. Her brain can start to release oxytocin. And this neuropeptide has been often called human superglue because of the role it plays in human bonding and relationships. They have found that it can actually do a couple things in your brain. It causes a massive emotional bond. It'll impair your critical thinking abilities. It'll impair your memory of negative experiences. It'll make you trust the person more. Women often release it during childbirth, breastfeeding, sexual arousal, and men typically only release it during sexual intimacy, because obviously we don't breastfeed nearly as often, and so that's not really in the picture. But when you think about this, okay, a woman is giving birth, or she's releasing oxytocin. Pitocin, which is used to induce labor, is simply a synthetic oxytocin. Now, so oxytocin, though, you think of during delivery of a baby, you know, she feels bonded to the baby, bonded to the husband, bonded to the doctor, bonded to the nurses, bonded to everybody in that room, to the point where 2 years after the delivery, she'll see the doctor in a grocery store. Oh, doctor, you delivered. He's like, who are you? I don't know you. But she has this tremendous bond with everybody in that room, bonded to her husband, bonded to the baby, but also less critical of the negative experiences of this, of the pain of childbirth. And I saw this with my own eyes in the delivery room. When my wife was delivering our first child, I mean, the agony, and like, Jason, this is your fault, yeah, never touch me again. And then, you know, an hour later, she's like, that was beautiful, I want more babies. And I'm like, wow, how did that happen? It airbrushes you of those negative experiences. Breastfeeding, she feels bonded, she feels close, she's not as critical, I'm up for the 30th time tonight. And you're looking at the positive, not the negative. And then you think about human sexuality. In marriage, what it does is it blinds you and it binds you. And that's perfect in marriage, because there's going to be faults that your spouse has, and it's helpful if you can overlook some of those faults. But if you're dating somebody and your brain is flooded with oxytocin, your judgment is toast. That you feel like you're emotionally married to this person and you can't critically look at some of the faults in the relationship. And so inside of marriage, it's a recipe for greater marital happiness, but outside of marriage, it really clouds your judgment. And a study just came out recently that showed that husbands and wives, when the wife is sexually intimate with the wife and close to her on a regular basis, his oxytocin levels are very high. And they did a study that when an attractive woman would come, a stranger would come to him, he would naturally create more space between them. They said it was between 10 to 12 inches more that he would back off from this attractive woman if his oxytocin levels were high. And they did the same test with men who had not been sexually intimate with their wives, and there was a lot of distance there. They found those guys were 10 to 12 inches closer to these women when the attractive woman would walk in. That the oxytocin almost creates this natural buffer, so to speak, that makes you want to bond with the one who you're supposed to be bonded to. And it all just gets back to God is the one who gave us this gift of human sexuality. And if we use it according to His designs, it's a blessing upon us. And when we break His commandments, we're really just breaking ourselves. Well, I remember there's a high school teacher in America who taught at an all-girls high school, and she knew some university-aged guys who were practicing their faith in college. So she invited them, could you come talk to my high school girls about how to stay strong in your faith in college? And the guys, oh yeah, sure. And so these 5 or so guys come and they kind of give a little talk to the high school girls. During the talk, it came up that one of them looks at pornography. And the teacher said, you know, in front of the girls, he said, do you think that that could present a problem in your marriage one day? And he was perplexed. He said, what, that I look at pornography? And she's like, yeah. And he said, well, why would that be a problem? He said, isn't that what a wife is for? Well, it's not really what you want to say in front of 30 teenage girls who subsequently tore the guy to pieces. And he realized that, okay, marriage is not the fulfillment of porn. Porn is the distortion of human love. And I'm meeting in America young girls who say, Jason, I want to get married, but I never want to have sex. I want to have a completely celibate marriage. Or girls saying, Jason, I am asexual. I have no sexual attraction whatsoever. And when you start to dig into these and you start talking, they explain, well, all I've ever seen of sex is what I saw on the internet. And that's so violent and degrading and disgusting. I want nothing to do with that. And you know, you have to affirm them that you're right to be repulsed by this, because that's not God's plan for human sexuality. And the problem is people are getting hooked on this stuff 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. And by the time they get married, their view of human intimacy is so warped where they actually found that the neuroplasticity of your brain, meaning the brain is a plastic organ. You can change it, you can shape it. They looked through autopsies of people who are professional violin players that actually over the course of their life developed a physically larger part of the brain associated with the fine motor skills necessary for playing the violin. They weren't born with that. They actually grew new brain to be able to help you to do that. And with pornography, they found with each visual experience, especially if it's tied in to the sexual arousal and all the chemicals and hormones in your brain during that, you will actually sculpt the structure of your own brain to essentially get bored with the most gorgeous supermodels in less than a minute. Where it's like, okay, next one, next one, next one, and you need greater highs, something more exotic, someone different, someone, you know, doing something you've never seen before, something more violent. And what's happening is then these guys are getting married and they can't even make love to their wives. They're expecting their wives to live up to this impossible standard of being a different porn star every 5 minutes. And as a result, the divorces are going through the roof, the heartache, and then the kids are finding their dad's porn collection, and the boys get hooked, and then the girl can't even look at her dad anymore because she knows what he does in his free time. This is not helping us to have healthy sexual lives. This is not, as the catchphrase is, sex-positive behavior. This is annihilating authentic human love. And so we've got to fight against it as single people as a form of marriage preparation. That I don't want to bring this harem of imaginary brides in my brain into my own wedding room. I want to kill this habit right now so I can be free to authentically love my wife. Yeah, 2 websites I'd recommend. Ours is chastityproject.com, then also Matt Fradd, a fellow Australian's website, which is theporneffect.com. And one thing that he does a great job pointing out is like, porn is not just a guy problem. There's this myth, well, that's a guy thing. You know, girls don't struggle with lust. Girls struggle with emotions and modesty. Guys struggle with lust. This is not fair, because then it leaves any girl who does struggle with to feel like she's a freak of nature. And she doesn't even want to confess it because she's too humiliated. I'm the only girl on earth that struggles with looking at pornography. I remember one young woman said, you know, when guys are hooked on porn, they have almost like this fellowship about it. Like, we're all in prison together. Yeah, let's hold each other accountable. We can break free from this. But she said when women are struggling with porn, she's like, they're in a prison, but they're each in their own cell, and they think that there's nobody else in that entire prison but them. And so it's important that we break away from these stereotypes to realize that this is not just a guy problem, this is a human problem. And we need to fight together as brothers and sisters in Christ to be free from this. So theporneffect.com is a great website to help.